Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Breathe Break for Your Brain. I'm Leah Lund. I'm the creator of One Whole Health, and we help you change your brain to put a stop to overwhelm and anxiety and fear and self-doubt and self-sabotage. And one thing you can do to help your brain break free of all of those things is give your brain the rest it needs. And I'm not talking about sleep here. I'm actually talking about rest, mental space, time to not be concentrating on things, time that you just clear your mind and maybe even close your eyes. And so here in our Supercharge Your Brain group, we do this every Monday together at 11 o'clock Pacific. And that was not just part of Reboot Your Brain. So if you came into this group as a part of the Reboot Your Brain series, know that this is a practice that we literally practice together every single Monday at 11 o'clock Pacific. So welcome to the Breathe Break for today. So there are dozens of research studies that show the benefit of rest on your brain. And I wanted to share just a couple with you today. So a website and blog called Welcome to the Information Age is quoted as saying that every day the average person produces 6 newspapers worth of information in our head. And this is compared to just 2.5 pages 24 years ago. So in 24 years, it is a 200-fold increase of the amount of thoughts and stimulation and partial thoughts and just mental activity that's going on in our brain on any given day. And that's a lot of overstimulation for our brain. Our brains are busier than ever, and this is having detrimental effect on us, and it's why the rest for the brain is so important. Mary Helen Immordino Yang, she's from the University of California, she says that downtime is the opportunity for the brain to make sense of what it's already learned, to surface fundamental unresolved tension in your life, and to reflect away from the external world by turning into the internal world. So this research applies to all kinds of rest periods. One thing is every 90 minutes taking a 10-minute break for your brain, where you just excuse yourself from whatever you've been concentrating on and focusing on so hard, and maybe you go walk around, or maybe you literally close your eyes, because visual stimulation is very taxing to our brain. It takes a lot of our nutrient and our fuel and our energy, and so even just closing your eyes can be a very positive break for your brain. And that's every 90 minutes, some kind of break for about 10 minutes. That's very, very powerful. Rest can also be things like naps and vacations and a walk out in nature, and certainly meditation. All of these help to increase your productivity. There's the catch there, is that it's counterintuitive. It does not make you less productive. It actually makes you more productive, because your brain can solve problems better when it has rest periods. And your brain can process and come to conclusion instead of having half-complete thoughts just circulating and busying up your mind. You will have better attention, better focus, better productivity. You'll be able to solidify your memories and store them. And rest is when the brain creates logic and order to what it has seen and experienced. And this encourages creativity as well. And there's some really great research coming out of Harvard Medical School that even shows rest turns off genes that ordinarily would break down and kill our brain cells. So in other words, rest activates a gene that helps your neurons respond to stress and prevents neural degeneration or breakdown of our brain cells. So that's how important rest is. And I'm talking all kinds of rest. The 10 minutes every 90. Good morning, Yvonne. The 10 minutes every 90 minutes of rest, and the longer prolonged periods like taking your weekends to yourself, taking your holidays to yourself, and certainly going on lots of vacation time as well. Today I wanted to share another way to rest your brain, and it's a way that you can rest your brain even while you are working, and I call it the resting brain state. This is mindfulness. anytime that you only focus on the one thing you're doing at the time and you put everything else out of your mind, it is more restful for your brain than when you're thinking about 5 things at once. This concept of multitasking, our brain really doesn't multitask. What it does is it switches back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that all creates stress and neural degeneration for our brain. So mindfulness, the practice of bringing your attention to only one thing at a time, is rest for your brain, even while you're problem solving, working, taking care of your family, whatever it is you're doing. When you bring that mindfulness piece to it, you are resting while you work. And it alleviates this mental chatter of half-complete thoughts. And you flip back to that, oh, and now I have to finish that. Now, what was I thinking? And what was I going to do? And what? That stimulation back and forth, that is happening so much now from video games and technology that our young people's brains, which should completely form by age 26, they're not completely forming by that time anymore because of all the back and forth split attention that our high information society and culture develops now. So focusing your mindfulness, focusing on one thing at a time is really, really important. Another thing that's very helpful for the brain in order to focus on one thing at a time is have set time blocks in your day where that's the time you're doing this, and it's the only time you're doing it, and you're not going to think about all the things that you're not doing because you're focused on that one thing. And so it really comes down to set time blocks for productivity, and then those tasks that are just daily routine, they need to be done every day, finding a routine for them that doesn't take up much time, and you do it the same time, the same way, every single day. So an example of a time frame of a daily calendar that would be very restful for your brain would be, let's say you start your job at 9 o'clock. Maybe checking into email and social media is the first thing that you do if it's part of your job. Very first thing you do for 10 minutes right away, and then you're done with it. And then that would start your first time block, roughly like 9:15 to 10:45. First 90-minute period to get one important thing done for the day. Then 10 minutes rest and recovery. You go walk, you put on some music, you do some deep breathing, you step out into the sunshine if you can, but something to clear your mind. Then you come back in and you've got one more 90-minute productivity period where you focus on one task, one project, one thing to put your attention on for that whole time period. That would take you till maybe 12:30. You have an hour lunch, which is even more rest and rejuvenation for your brain, a time to be solving problems, a time to be bringing order to the information you've exposed the brain to so far during that day. By 1:30, you pick up again another 90-minute time block, followed by a 10-minute break. Brings you to 3:15 to 4:45, the fourth 90-minute time block of your day. 4:45, maybe time to check email again. 5 o'clock, you leave. Commute and dinner happen, and that leaves you one 90-minute time block in the evening, hopefully for you, hopefully for your passions and your hobbies and something that you want to be doing in the evening. And by 9 p.m., starting to shift down your gears, dim lights, shut off noise, get ready for sleep. So this is a typical day that is restful for your brain, as opposed to a day where you're trying to do all 5 things all at once. You don't do them well. You don't get it complete. You have to carry it over to the next day. You're halfway done with this and halfway done with that, and it's all mental chatter in your mind that stresses you out and makes you feel overwhelmed and anxious. This way, the brain works in cycles, and you are working with the rhythm of the brain. So there's a couple of things that I'll say about this. Some of you might have heard that description of a day and you might have left. You might have just said, what is she talking about? That's not possible. My family would never understand that. My job would never understand that. I can't make that happen. There are some tips that I have for making this kind of cyclical rhythmic day possible for your brain. The first thing is that you have to teach other people what your boundaries are. We train people how to treat us. So if you are in your 90-minute segment where you're working on a certain project, And whether you're working from home and somebody from your family comes in to try to interrupt you, or if you're at the office and somebody else from the office comes in and wants to interrupt you and talk about something else, you need to be the one to let them know this isn't the time that I can focus on that. I'm sorry, I'm working on XYZ now. If you even need to explain it, you probably don't. And I'd be happy to hear your question at 10:45. I'd be happy to hear your question at the end of the day at 4:45. But we have to train people to know our parameters. In this information age of texts and direct messages, this is why it's so essential to only check your emails and digital communications at certain times of the day, because there's a culture of people expecting an immediate answer. And that will go on and on and on and stress out your brain and overwhelm your brain and overstimulate your brain unless you're the one to create the boundaries. So, for example, if we have journal forums for our clients here at One Whole Health. Private clients have Voxer access so they can message me. If it's after 8 p.m., there is a 99.99999% chance they're not going to get a response that night. And that's because that's my parameter. 8 p.m., I'm done with technology. I'm done with interaction. I am calming down my brain for a really great night's sleep. And I am a champion sleeper. I can sleep 8 hours anywhere, planes, trains, automobiles. It will happen because I've made it a priority my entire life. So you have to train the boundaries and the parameters of when you're available to other people. And if you're thinking, well, my kids will never listen to that. Yes, they will. They'll listen to that if you reinforce it with what's important to them. So maybe it is when and where and how they get their allowance. I think allowance is still a thing. I hope. Sometimes I wonder if kids don't just get whatever they want when they want it because they think they need it. But if you're a parent that still has allowance in play, maybe that's always at before 8 p.m. on Tuesdays. If they get a weekly allowance, they get it right before 8 p.m. on Tuesdays. And if that is your boundary, your rule over your time, then if they come to you at 8:05 p.m. on Tuesday and want their allowance, I'm sorry, you'll have to get it next week. The time for that is done. And it, trust me, won't take more than once, maybe twice, to train them. If they really want their allowance, if it's important to them, and I'm sure it is, they have to ask at the right time, because you're not available 24/7. You are not a fast food restaurant. You are not available anytime they want, with no concern for your downtime and your rest time for your brain. And if you think that's hard, it is hard. Actually, this morning, one of my mentors was interviewing a guy named Joe DeSena. If you know Joe, he created Spartan races. They're those great kind of military, like obstacle course races that people go to challenge themselves all over the world. They're in something like 40 countries. He was speaking with my mentor this morning, and he said for parenting, his rule for parenting is do it the hard way. Do the hard thing. It might not be the thing that gets you instant love and respect and yay, dad's so great, mom's so wonderful, but do the thing that will build character for your children over time, the thing that they'll come back to you 10 years later and say, I see why you did it that way. He believes, and I agree with him, that's really what parenting is creating boundaries and then showing by your own example. He didn't say this, I'm going to add this. Showing by your own example how you care for your health and wellness and happiness. Not by what you say, but by how you have your own self-care practices and put yourself first. So I want to address that. The last thing I'll say today about this is, for women especially, we are people pleasers, right? And almost every woman I've ever talked to, when I inquire, well, why do you do that then? Why do you sacrifice your sleep or your health or your meal or your time for someone else? And women will say it is because they care so much about their family. It is because they want to do the best for their family. And I think that that is true to a certain degree. And I also think that there is something underlying that is straight from ego mind. And that is, women want to be liked. They want to be loved. And so they think pleasing everybody by working on their time schedule and letting their own brain get overwhelmed and overstimulated, they think that that will make them loved and liked. And the reality is, it doesn't mean a thing, and it only drives your health and well-being into the ground and taps you out so that you have nothing more to give your family. And so instead of searching for love and approval from our family and our friends and our boss, love yourself. Love yourself first. Love yourself with radical, non-negotiable self-care that includes rest for your brain while you're working on something, then 10 minutes where you're not working on anything, and at least one of the 5 blocks out of the day to have just for you. This is critical. This is proper care and feeding of a human brain, and proper care and feeding of a wonderful person that is not living to their full potential and not expressing themselves fully if they're constantly keeping their own brain in a state of panic and anxiety and overwhelm. So if this has resonated for you today, I invite you to share this with a woman you love, because together we can model this new example of how to be mothers and wives and teachers and parents, and we can birth a new culture. And it starts with women, and it starts with women taking care of themselves. So share this with the woman you love today. Put some of these ideas into practice and post and share what you did so that we can celebrate your new way of thinking and your new resting brain state and your way of resting while you work. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being here.